Welcome to the world of science fiction, where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. The Grand Plaza of Heliarchus 7 vibrated with pre-ceremonial energy as multicolored light displays scattered across the evening sky. Musicians with 3 arms played hovering instruments while tentacled acrobats twisted in gravity-defying formations above the crowd. Street vendors hawked sizzling chlorophyll fruits, their emerald steam rising in spirals that carried scents both alien and mouth-watering. And in the center of this magnificent chaos, on the most sacred parade platform where galactic dignitaries would soon process, sat Dean Creston, deliberately oblivious to it all. He turned a page in his dog-eared copy of Cosmic Nymph Verses, At Hu Colossus, squinting at a particularly dramatic battle sequence. His worn black cloak pooled around him on the ceremonial plinth, the hood half-covering hair that hadn't seen proper care in months. A gnawed wing rat bone lay discarded beside him. "My lord!" A ceremonial priest in elaborate silver robes approached, voice quavering. "Perhaps you might consider relocating? The 4 Sisters of Alventur will process through here momentarily for the fusion ceremony." Without looking up, Dean flipped another page. "Perhaps you might consider relocating to a distance where my sacred peace won't be disturbed." The priest wrung his hands, backing away with a nervous bow. 2 servants passed behind him, their whispers carrying clearly. "That's Lord Grace's spot. The princess's future husband will be walking there. Best not anger him. I heard he publicly executed 30 servants last month for serving cold meals." "That's nothing. My cousin's friend works in the palace. Says he's building a harem of 300 concubines, all different species, even while preparing to marry the Aristoxan princesses." Terrifying man. Dean's mouth twitched at the corners. These idiots thought he was someone important. Perfect cover for an afternoon of uninterrupted reading. He reached for his snack container, arm heavy with a fatigue born of more than just laziness. His fingers trembled slightly before the container's edge. With a frown of concentration that deepened the lines of his prematurely weary face, he glared at the container until it clicked open. The hovering security droid at his side, Model R8Z0, whom Dean simply called Rays, emitted the mechanical equivalent of a snort. "You are truly magnificent, Master," Rays intoned, silver plating gleaming in the multicolored ceremonial lights, concealed weapon systems humming just below audible range. When the priest had retreated a safe distance, the droid swiveled and hissed after him. "Approach again, and I'll sell your liver on the black market." A group of fur-clad women passed by, their curious eyes lingering on Dean. Rays immediately pivoted, voice modulator switching to a smooth, velvety tone. "My sincerest apologies for the harsh language, exquisite ones. My master is simply magnificent in all things." Dean rolled his eyes. "Stop terrorizing the locals and flirting with tourists, Rays. I'm trying to reach the part where the nymph finally defeats the..." The crowd noise dropped suddenly, like someone had muted the entire plaza. The ceremonial orchestra, which had been practicing scales, fell silent mid-note. The tentacled acrobats froze in position overhead, and then they appeared. 4 figures glided onto the platform, moving with synchronized grace that suggested years of coordinated training. Their skin shimmered with varying shades of violet, from the lightest lavender to deep plum, set against ceremonial garments that seemed woven from captured starlight, semi-transparent in places, yet somehow maintaining royal dignity. Their hair flowed like liquid silver accentuated with pinpoints of light, as if galaxies themselves had been captured in those strands. "Sweet mercy," Rays whispered, weapon systems powering down involuntarily. Dean continued reading, or pretended to. His peripheral vision betrayed him, though, capturing glimpses of the 4 Alventur daughters. Each possessed the kind of beauty that transcended species preference. Perfect proportions, statuesque height, and eyes so vividly blue they seemed to contain entire oceans. The tallest of the four, with intricate silver ornaments woven through her hair, stepped forward. She moved with purpose directly toward Dean, ignoring the gasps from the ceremonial staff and security guards who trailed behind the sisters. She stopped exactly 2 paces from where he sat, her shadow falling across his comic. "It's you," she said, voice carrying like warm honey laced with something potent. "You are the one." Dean turned a page, maintaining his unconcerned facade despite the sudden acceleration of his pulse. "If you're referring to whoever ate the last cheese-flavored snack in the vendor row, I deny all involvement. The one who can complete the ceremony." She stepped closer, the scent of exotic flowers accompanying her movement. "The one destined to possess the 4 bodies of the crown." Dean finally looked up, one eyebrow raised. "Wait, does that sound sexual or dangerous, or both?" The crowd had formed a semicircle around them now, hundreds of beings from dozens of systems watching in stunned silence. "I am Mirret," she continued, sinking gracefully to one knee before him, bringing her face level with his. "I am the eldest, and by the will of our goddesses, I am prepared to be yours. Here, now." Her eyes, those impossible blue depths, locked onto his. She leaned forward until her lips nearly brushed his ear. "Claim me," she whispered, sending an involuntary shiver down his spine. In that moment, with the precision of dancers who had rehearsed 1,000 times, her 3 sisters moved. 2 of them, Albina with her shoulder-length hair adorned with crystal droplets, and Taya with her elaborate neck tattoos, flanked Dean on either side. The youngest, Rona, stepped behind them with a mischievous smile and pressed something on her wrist device. A shimmering dome of energy enveloped them all, cutting off the gasps from the crowd. "And us too," the 3 sisters said in perfect unison. Inside their protective bubble, time seemed suspended. The orchestra conductor's baton had frozen mid-swing. A child's ice cream cone tipped in slow motion, tumbling toward the plaza tiles. Dean closed his comic with deliberate care. "You realize," he said, finally giving them his full attention, "I was literally just sitting here reading a comic, right?" Ray's circuits whirred with alarm. "Master, I've seen this scenario in hollow films. These are clearly con artists attempting to seduce you for nefarious purposes. They wish to enjoy your magnificent body in private." Mirret's perfect composure cracked slightly, her violet cheeks darkening with what appeared to be a blush. "That's not—" "They'll take you to a secret chamber," Ray's continued, mechanical arms flailing. "Remove your clothing with false promises and then—" "Enough, Ray's." Dean sighed, running a hand through his unkempt hair. 4 royal guards in crystalline armor materialized through the energy barrier, bowing deeply to the sisters before turning to Dean. "Sir," the lead guard said with stiff formality, "the princesses request you accompany us immediately." "Princesses?" Dean repeated, looking between the 4 violet-skinned women with new consideration. Mirret's eyes studied his face, searching for something. For a moment, uncertainty flashed across her features. "You don't recognize me, do you?" she asked, her voice suddenly smaller. Dean stood, his movement unexpectedly labored, as if gravity worked differently for him than everyone else. "Should I?" The smallest sister, Rona, whispered something to Taya, who nudged Albina. All 3 stared at the medallion half hidden beneath Dean's cloak. Mirret straightened to her full height, inches taller than Dean himself. "It doesn't matter. The ceremony cannot wait. You will come with us, willingly or otherwise." "Huh," Dean said, tucking his comic into an inner pocket. "Somehow I thought royal invitations would be more inviting." "Master!" Reyes positioned himself between Dean and the guards. "Shall I vaporize them? I've recently upgraded my disintegration protocols." The crowd beyond the barrier pressed closer, thousands of eyes watching the unfolding drama. Ceremonial dignitaries gesticulated wildly. Security personnel shouted into communication devices, and through it all, Dean's expression remained a masterpiece of impassive boredom. "Fine," he said finally. "I was getting tired of sitting here anyway." As they led him away, Mirret walked beside him, close enough that their arms nearly touched. "The medallion you wear," she said quietly. "Where did you get it?" Dean's hand moved unconsciously to the golden disc hanging from his neck on a matching chain. "This old thing? Had it forever. Gift from—" The words died in his throat as a fragment of memory surfaced. Violet skin, childish laughter, and a solemn promise made long ago. He stopped walking. "Wait a second," he said, turning to study Mirret's face more carefully. A commotion at the plaza's edge interrupted whatever realization might have dawned. A squadron of heavily armed soldiers in black armor pushed through the crowd, led by a man with gleaming cybernetic enhancements visible across half his face. "The princess's betrothed," one guard muttered. Mirret's face hardened. "We don't have time. Come now." As they hustled him toward a towering crystalline transport vessel, Dean glanced back at the cyborg commander, whose enhanced eye had locked onto him with lethal focus. "Let me guess," Dean said dryly. "He's not a fan of comic books either." The violet sky of Eliarchus 7 darkened as they rushed him aboard the royal ship, the first evening stars appearing just as the loading ramp sealed behind them. Consciousness returned to Dean in layers. First came touch, his body sinking into bedding so plush it seemed to cradle each individual vertebra. Then smell, exotic fragrances mingling in the air, floral notes he couldn't identify, with undertones of something metallic and expensive. Sound followed, hushed, urgent whispers nearby, the gentle hum of a ship's engine at cruising speed. Finally, he opened his eyes. The ceiling above him rippled with holographic star charts, entire galaxies drifting slowly across what appeared to be the most extravagant private quarters he'd ever seen. Gold and platinum inlays traced complex patterns across walls of some crystalline material that seemed to breathe with its own inner light. "Where's my comic?" he muttered, attempting to sit up. Movement caught his eye. Mirret stood by a viewport, her statuesque form silhouetted against the streaking stars of hyperspace. She whirled around at his voice, her composure fractured by unmistakable fear. She crossed the room in 3 swift strides, constantly glancing over her shoulder at the door. "You're awake," she whispered, dropping to her knees beside the bed. The emerald cloak she now wore flowed around her like liquid jade, accentuating the deep violet of her skin and making her ocean blue eyes even more striking. "We don't have much time." Dean propped himself up on his elbows. "Time for what exactly? An explanation might be nice, preferably one that doesn't involve kidnapping charges." "Please," she said, voice low and urgent as she grasped his hand with both of hers. "Marry me, now, before all is lost." Dean blinked twice, certain he'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" The door burst open. The other 3 sisters crowded in, each wearing ceremonial cloaks in different jewel tones, sapphire, ruby, and amethyst. Rona, the youngest, slammed her palm against a control panel, and the door sealed shut with a series of mechanical clicks. "And us too," they said in unison, then exchanged glances at their synchronized outburst. "Okay," Dean said slowly, extracting his hand from Mirret's grip. "I'm officially concerned that I've been abducted by a cult, or worse, an elaborate reality show." "There's no time for jokes," Albina snapped, her violet complexion darkening with emotion. "Are you going to help us, or not?" "Help you do what?" Dean demanded, swinging his legs over the edge of the bed. I was sitting on a ceremonial platform reading a comic book just last night. Now I'm apparently being proposed to by 4 alien princesses. There's clearly a chapter missing in this story. Mirret stood, drawing a deep breath. 24 years ago, on Aristox, our homeworld, the royal palace received a distinguished visitor, Alan Creston II, Grand Admiral of Earth's fleet, Supreme Master of the Forge, Conqueror of the Sky Colonies, Master of the Gravitational Chamber, and my grandfather, Dean finished, a fragment of memory surfacing. Tin Can with a mustache. Beat me whenever I said no. The words triggered a cascade of images in his mind, memories he hadn't accessed in decades flooding back with sudden clarity. I'm not going to your stupid Aristox. I'd rather train in the grav chamber at 90G. 9-year-old Dean dug his heels into the polished floor of the starship hangar as his grandfather dragged him by the collar toward the boarding ramp. Admiral Creston, resplendent in his Earthfleet dress uniform with its constellation of medals, kept his iron grip firm. You'll represent Earth with dignity, boy. The trade agreements with Aristox are crucial for... Dean twisted suddenly, executing a perfect spinning kick aimed at his grandfather's jaw. The old man blocked it with casual ease, his weathered face never changing expression. Undisciplined as always, the Admiral sighed, deflecting 3 more lightning-fast strikes from the boy before capturing him in a restraint hold. Save it for your training, not your family. Later, nursing a fresh lump on his forehead and several new bruises beneath his formal attire, Dean stood beside his grandfather in the Aristoxan throne room. Crystal spires soared overhead, capturing and fracturing the light from 3 alien suns that streamed through massive viewports. We are honored by Earth's delegation, rumbled the purple-skinned king from his elevated throne, crown glittering with stones that seemed to contain entire nebulae. The honor is ours, Your Majesty, the Admiral replied with a formal bow. Dean mimicked the gesture with perfect form despite his internal rebellion. His grandfather's hand rested heavily on his shoulder, a warning against any disruption. After the formalities, he was dismissed to the palace gardens while the adults conducted their business. The moment he was alone, Dean withdrew a collapsible training sword from his boot and began slashing at the air, muttering under his breath. Drag me halfway across the quadrant just to bow to some crusty old king. Waste of time. A small stone whizzed toward his head from behind. Without turning, Dean sliced it cleanly in half with his blade, the 2 pieces falling to either side of him. Nice reflexes, said a young musical voice. Dean whirled around. Perched on the garden wall above him sat a girl about 7 years old. Her skin was a delicate shade of violet, her silver-white hair catching the triple sunlight. She wore an elaborate dress that seemed both regal and practical, the kind of outfit designed for a child who frequently escaped her caretakers. That crusty old king is my father, she informed him, swinging her legs casually. And I'm a princess, Mirret Alventure, eldest daughter of the crown. Dean's irritation evaporated, replaced by instant fascination. He'd never seen anyone so exotic yet so immediately compelling. I'm Dean, Creston, the Admiral's burden. She laughed, the sound like tiny bells. Want to see something cool? For the next month, while the Admiral negotiated trade deals and military alliances, Dean and Mirret became inseparable. They escaped the palace guards daily, exploring the city's markets and stealing exotic fruits when vendors weren't looking. She showed him secret caves and hidden forests, and they swam in the planet's famous rose-colored lakes, where the water buoyed them up like they weighed nothing. In return, Dean taught her earth-fighting techniques, always carefully holding back, letting her pin him or defeat him in their mock battles. He told her about his parents who had died in the Centauri War, leaving him to his grandfather's strict martial upbringing. "Will you come back?" she asked on their final day together, as they sat dangling their feet in a crystalline stream. "Doubt it," Dean said, flicking water droplets. "Grandfather's always busy, and I've got no one else to bring me." She fidgeted with something around her neck, then decisively removed it. "Take this." She placed a small, perfectly crafted gold medallion on a matching chain into his palm. The disc bore intricate engravings that seemed to shift when he looked at them directly. "This is a royal heirloom," she explained solemnly. "While you wear it, I remember you. And you remember me. Promise you'll keep it." "I promise," Dean replied, slipping it over his head. "But won't you get in trouble?" She grinned, revealing pointed canines. "Royal prerogative. I can do what I want." Back in the present, Dean's hand instinctively rose to the medallion still hanging around his neck. He stared at Mirret with new recognition, seeing beyond the regal adult to the mischievous child from his memories. "It was you," he said quietly, "with the rock and the pink lakes." Mirret's face softened. "You remember." "I thought that was a dream," Dean admitted, "or something my mind invented during one of Grandfather's punishment sessions in the grav chamber." "I recognized you immediately when I saw the medallion," Mirret said, touching the golden disc at his throat. "The royal crest of succession, the one I gave you when we were children." "Wait." Dean held up a hand. "Royal crest of what now?" "Succession," Taya interjected, her voice tense. "Its bearer has claim to the throne of Aristox, if they can defeat the current claimant in ritualized combat." Dean looked between the four sisters. "Is anyone going to explain what's actually happening here?" Mirret sank onto the edge of the bed beside him. "Our father was poisoned 4 years ago. He lies in stasis, kept between life and death. General Grace, his former advisor, seized power in the chaos and has maneuvered himself into position to claim the throne permanently." "By marrying you," Dean guessed. "By forcing all 4 of us to marry him," Albina corrected, disgust evident in her tone. "Aristoxan law requires all royal daughters to be wed before power can transfer through the female line." "But there's an ancient protocol," Rona added eagerly. "If a bearer of the royal crest challenges for the hand of the princesses and defeats the eldest in honorable combat, they supersede all other claims." Dean pinched the bridge of his nose. "So you want me to fight you, to marry you, to stop this Grace guy from taking over your planet?" "I remember you, Dean," Mirret said softly. "Even as a child, you were incredible. I watched you take down my father's elite guards because they wouldn't let you pick a fruit from the royal orchards. Your speed, your strength, they were legendary. 4 adult warriors, and you were 9 years old." Dean snorted. "Yeah, well, that was a long time ago. These days I can barely floss my teeth without getting winded." A sharp knock at the door made them all freeze. "Princesses," called a nervous voice. "General Grace has deployed 5 squads of mercenaries to secure the ship. His personal vessel has locked onto our position. He demands your immediate return to prepare for the ceremony." "Tell them we're coming," Mirret called back, then turned to Dean with renewed urgency. "Please, you're our only hope." "Look," Dean sighed, standing up with visible effort. "I'm not who you think I am anymore. Whatever you remember." He stretched his arms above his head, and his threadbare shirt tore along the seams with a dramatic rip. Beneath the fabric gleamed what appeared to be a second skin, a metallic mesh fitted perfectly to his torso, covered in complex circuitry and compression nodes. "What is that?" Taya gasped, stepping closer to examine the strange garment. "Gravitational restraint armor," Albina whispered, her scientific background evident in her immediate recognition. "Minimum 40 gravity units of constant pressure." Mirret's hand reached out, stopping just short of touching the mesh. "You're wearing an internal gravity field? All the time?" Dean grimaced. "Grandfather's parting gift. Said I could take it off when I either got married or came home admitting I was too weak to handle it. He shrugged. Stubborn pride kept it on. That was 15 years ago. 15 years at 40 times normal gravity? Rona's eyes widened. How are you even standing? Not easily, Dean admitted. He hesitated, then pressed a concealed switch at his collarbone. With a series of mechanical clicks and a final hydraulic hiss, the mesh loosened from his body. The armor clattered to the floor with a weight that dented the metal plating beneath it. Dean stood straighter, rolling his shoulders with an expression of dawning wonder. Without the concealing mesh, his true physique became apparent. Every muscle perfectly defined, his body a masterpiece of power held in perfect balance. He took a step forward and the movement carried a fluid grace that hadn't been present before. Another step, and he seemed to barely touch the ground. That's different, he said, looking at his own hands as if seeing them for the first time. He picked up a decorative metal sculpture from a nearby table, a piece that would require 2 normal men to lift, and balanced it on one finger. You've been training at 40 times gravity for 15 years, Mirret realized, a new hope lighting her features. On a normal gravity field, you're slightly less pathetic, Dean interrupted, though the corner of his mouth quirked upward. Reyes, who had been unusually quiet in a corner of the room, suddenly whirred to life. Master, your magnificent true form emerges. Shall I prepare your standard post-restraint removal celebratory destruction of furniture? Not now, Reyes. The ship shuddered violently. Alarm klaxons blared through the corridors. They're attempting to board, Albina announced, checking a wrist display. Cutting through the outer hull on Deck 7. Mirret stepped in front of Dean, all royal composure gone, her eyes wide with desperation. Will you fight for us? For Aristox? Dean looked at her for a long moment, memories of pink lakes and stolen fruit and childish laughter overlaying the desperate woman before him. He thought of a question she'd asked him in those gardens decades ago, a silly thing about courage that had made him laugh at the time. What did you used to say when we were kids? He asked quietly. A true warrior never runs from a worthy battle, she finished, her eyes widening in surprise that he remembered. Dean smiled, and for the first time, his expression held none of the weary cynicism that had defined him earlier. He rolled his shoulders again, feeling the power that had been compressed for so long finally free to express itself. Well, he said, cracking his knuckles as the sound of distant explosions echoed through the ship. It's been a long time since I visited Aristox. The royal ship shuddered as another explosion rocked its frame. Red emergency lights bathed the corridor in crimson as Dean followed Mirret and her sisters toward the command deck. Each step felt like floating after 15 years of crushing gravity, his muscles coiled with power that begged for release. They've breached the outer hull in 3 locations, Albina reported, checking her wrist display. Mercenary squads converging on our position. Dean's eyes narrowed as he assessed their situation. We need a plan beyond run and hope they miss. We can't outfight Grace's forces, Taya said. Not here. We need to reach Aristox and invoke the ceremonial challenge before he can complete the forced marriage ritual. A squad of 6 heavily armed mercenaries rounded the corner ahead, weapon sights instantly locking onto their group. Halt! By order of General Grace. Dean moved. One moment he stood behind the princesses. The next, he materialized before the mercenaries. Their neural-linked targeting systems couldn't track his movement. Before the first soldier could squeeze his trigger, Dean had disarmed 3 of them with a fluid series of strikes that seemed almost casual. The remaining 3 fired. Dean caught the first energy pulse with his palm, a technique his grandfather had drilled into him across thousands of grueling sessions. He redirected it into the ceiling. stepped between the other two blasts, and dismantled the remaining mercenaries with precise taps to pressure points that rendered them unconscious before they hit the deck. The entire encounter lasted 2.4 seconds. "That was," Rona whispered, her eyes wide. Dean flexed his fingers, surprised by his own capabilities. Apparently, 40 times gravity makes a difference. "Magnificent!" Reyes exclaimed, weapons systems glowing with excitement. "Master's true glory emerges. Shall I record your triumphs for posterity?" "Just watch our backs," Dean muttered, collecting two of the mercenary weapons. They reached the command deck where Mirret's loyal crew had barricaded themselves. The ship's captain, a tall, scaled humanoid with gill ridges, bowed deeply to the princesses. "Your Highnesses, we've evaded General Grace's main vessel, but 3 hunter-killers remain in pursuit. We can reach Aristox in 20 minutes if we push the engines beyond safety parameters." "Do it," Mirret commanded. The captain nodded. "And the human?" "He is my chosen champion," Mirret declared, her voice ringing with authority. "By ancient law, I invoke the right of ceremonial challenge." A collective gasp rose from the crew. The captain's scales shifted color in what Dean assumed was surprise. "The right hasn't been invoked in 7 generations," Albina explained quietly to Dean. "It supersedes all other claims but requires actual combat before the entire court." Aristox glowed like a violet jewel as they descended through its atmosphere. The capital city sprawled below, crystalline towers catching the light of 3 setting suns. At its center stood the royal temple, a massive structure of shifting geometric perfections that seemed to defy physical laws. Dean stood at the viewport, absorbing the view. "So, this is where little Mirret pushed me into that pink lake." Mirret joined him, her lips curving into a small smile. "You deserved it. You said princesses couldn't swim." "And you proved me spectacularly wrong," Dean chuckled, then sobered. "Are you sure about this? I don't want to hurt you." "You won't," she said confidently. "But you must make it convincing. Grace will be looking for any excuse to invalidate the challenge." The ship docked at a secondary port, away from the main ceremonial platforms. Loyalists to the princesses escorted them through hidden passageways toward the grand ceremonial hall. "The hall will be packed," Taya whispered as they moved through ancient stone corridors. "Grace has been planning this day for years, the day he forces us into marriage and seizes total control." They emerged onto an observation balcony overlooking an enormous amphitheater filled with thousands of spectators from across the galaxy. At the center stood a circular platform inlaid with luminescent patterns that pulsed with energy. General Grace dominated the platform, a massive figure enhanced with cybernetic upgrades that glinted menacingly beneath his ceremonial armor. The right half of his face had been replaced with a metal carapace housing a glowing red sensor array. He raised his mechanized arms, addressing the crowd. "Today marks the beginning of Aristox's greatest era. With the blessing of our traditions, I shall unite with the 4 daughters of the crown and lead our empire to... I invoke the right of ceremonial challenge." Mirret's voice cut through the hall like a blade. Every head turned as she strode onto the platform, her sisters behind her, Dean at her side. The crowd erupted in shocked whispers. Grace's organic eye narrowed as his cybernetic one whirred, focusing on Dean. "Who is this? Human?" Grace spat the word like a curse. "My chosen champion," Mirret announced, "bearer of the royal crest of succession." She gestured to the medallion around Dean's neck. Grace's laughter boomed through the hall. "A human? This pathetic creature? The rite requires combat, princess. Your champion will die before the first exchange is complete." Dean shrugged, adopting his most bored expression. "Probably, but I've got nothing better to do today." The medallion at his throat caught the ceremonial lights, its engraving suddenly glowing with inner fire. A gasp swept through the crowd as ancient symbols projected above it. "The crest accepts the challenge," declared an elderly officiator, his voice trembling with disbelief. Grace's confidence faltered momentarily before his cybernetic face reset to arrogant certainty. "So be it. The human will face Princess Mirrit in ritual combat. When he fails, the princesses will fulfill their duty to Aristox." Dean stepped into the center of the platform as Mirrit took her position opposite him. She wore ritual combat armor that accentuated rather than concealed her perfect form, her violet skin luminous under the ceremonial lights. "Begin," the officiator commanded. Mirrit launched herself at Dean with surprising speed, her strikes precise and powerful. He blocked each blow effortlessly, reading her movements as clearly as he'd once read his comics. Every attack she threw contained a subtle message, directions for how their performance should unfold. "Make it look good," she whispered between exchanges. Dean nodded imperceptibly, then began a carefully choreographed response. He allowed her to land glancing blows while gradually increasing the impression of his own power. To the crowd, it appeared as though the princess was putting up a valiant fight against an increasingly dominant opponent. Grace watched from the edge of the platform, his cybernetic eye recording every movement, searching for irregularities. After 5 minutes of combat that gradually escalated in intensity, Dean decided it was time to end the charade. He caught Mirrit's wrist mid-strike, swept her legs with a move so fast it appeared as a blur to the spectators, and pinned her to the platform with perfect control, enough pressure to signify victory without causing pain. The officiator's voice rang out, "The champion prevails. By ancient law, he claims the right of succession through marriage." Following tradition, Dean leaned down and claimed Mirrit's lips in a kiss that began as ceremonial but quickly ignited with genuine passion, a rekindling of childhood connection transformed by adult awareness. When they parted, her ocean blue eyes reflected surprise and something deeper. "No!" Grace's roar shattered the moment. "This is deception. The human cheats." His cybernetic arm transformed, components rearranging into a weapon system that hummed with deadly energy. "Kill them!" he commanded his mercenaries. "Kill them all!" The troops moved to comply, but halted in confusion as the royal guard stepped between them and the platform. The captain of the guard removed his helmet, revealing scaled features. "We recognize the medallion," he announced. "And we recognize the grandson of Admiral Creston, ally of Aristox for generations." He knelt and his soldiers followed suit. "Our loyalty is to the true succession." Grace howled with rage, firing his weapon directly at Dean. Dean twisted his body mid-step, allowing the bolt to pass inches from his ribs. With a smooth spin, he redirected its momentum using a mirrored surface on a fallen weapon. "That's one way to say you're losing," he muttered. Grace charged, his cybernetic enhancements launching him across the platform with lethal force. Dean sidestepped at the last possible moment, grabbing the general's mechanical arm and using his own momentum to flip him onto his back with enough force to crack the platform. Before Grace could recover, Taya stepped forward, activating a holographic projection visible to the entire assembly. "Evidence of General Grace's treason," she announced as medical records and surveillance footage played before the stunned audience. "The poisoning of our father, the assassination of loyalists, the corruption of our sacred institutions." Grace scrambled to his feet, desperation replacing calculation in his organic eye. "Kill them! Anyone who kills them will be rewarded beyond measure." A massive crash interrupted the chaos as an entire section of the ceremonial hall's wall exploded inward. Through the debris stepped a towering figure, a man in his 80s whose weathered face carried the same stern lines as Dean's, though creased with decades more experience. His uniform bore the insignia of Earthfleet's highest rank, and his eyes burned with cold fury. "Grandfather?" Dean's composure cracked for the first time. Admiral Alan Creston II surveyed the scene with clinical detachment. "You removed the gravity restraints," he stated flatly, "before the agreed-upon time." Dean gestured around at the chaos. "I'm literally in the middle of preventing a coup." The Admiral's iron gaze swept the room, causing even Grace's mercenaries to take involuntary steps backward. Without warning, he launched himself at Dean with speed that belied his age. What followed demolished what remained of the ceremonial platform. Grandfather and grandson exchanged blows that would have shattered normal humans, their combat styles identical yet uniquely expressed. The princesses scrambled for safety as the two Crestons tore through stone, metal, and crystal with equal disregard. "You insubordinate whelp!" the Admiral roared, landing a blow that sent Dean crashing through an ornamental pillar. The restraints were to remain until marriage or admission of weakness. Dean recovered instantly, countering with a strike that his grandfather barely blocked. "I'm getting married, right now. That was the whole point of the ceremony you just interrupted." They grappled at the center of the destruction, surrounded by guards too terrified to intervene. "Wait," Dean said suddenly, pausing mid-strike. "How did you even know I removed the restraints?" Both men turned toward Reyes, who had been enthusiastically recording the battle. "Apologies, Master," the droid chirped, backing away. "Regular status updates to the Admiral were part of my core programming. For your safety, of course." "You've been spying on me for 15 years, Dean demanded. "Monitoring," the Admiral corrected, "for your own good." Their standoff held for 3 heartbeats before something unexpected happened. Admiral Creston's stern facade cracked, revealing a hint of a smile. "You've grown strong, boy," he said, his voice gruff with suppressed emotion. "Still weaker than you," Dean admitted. The Admiral nodded once, then opened his arms. Dean hesitated only a moment before stepping into his grandfather's embrace, a bear hug that would have crushed ordinary men. "I missed you, Runt," the old man muttered. "Missed you too, you stubborn fossil." The reunion was interrupted by the unmistakable sound of a weapon powering up. Grace, taking advantage of the distraction, had retrieved a fallen mercenary's disruptor rifle and aimed it directly at Mirret's heart. "If I can't have the throne," he snarled, "no one will." Neither Creston moved. They didn't need to. Reyes, who had positioned himself behind Grace during the family drama, extended 3 bladed appendages simultaneously through the General's cybernetic components. "Threatening my master's mate is suboptimal behavior," the droid informed him pleasantly as Grace collapsed. "Now, your liver really is available for the black market. I know a buyer." 3 months later, Aristoc celebrated the grandest royal wedding in 7 generations. By ancient tradition, Dean married all 4 princesses in a ceremony that united their bloodlines and secured the succession. Earthfleet representatives stood alongside Aristocsan nobility as Admiral Creston formally presented his grandson to the recovering king. Advanced Earth medical technology had finally purged the poison from the old monarch's system, though he remained weakened. From his ceremonial bed, he clasped Dean's hand. "My daughters chose well," he said, his voice thin but determined. "Though I understand you didn't exactly volunteer for the position." "Best kidnapping I've ever experienced," Dean replied with a wry smile. Later, as evening fell across the Crystal City, Dean lounged on the royal balcony, finally finishing the comic he'd been reading when all this began. Reyes stood guard nearby, threatening passing servants with creative dismemberment should they disturb his master. Mirret joined him, her ceremonial regalia replaced by simpler attire that nonetheless highlighted her ethereal beauty. She leaned against his shoulder, watching the three suns set in sequence. The man who wanted nothing but peace and quiet now rules an interstellar kingdom, she observed with a smile. Dean set aside his comic, pulling her closer. I never wanted to be a hero, he admitted, fingers tracing the medallion that had changed his fate. But I always wanted to see you again. Inside the royal chambers, Dean's three other wives watched from the doorway, their expressions a mixture of amusement and anticipation as the golden medallion caught the last rays of sunlight between the new king and his queen. He never wanted to be a hero, but no one could stand against the man who, even while lying down, conquered the universe. 5 years after the royal wedding of Aristox, the crystalline palace gardens bloomed with exotic flowers under the light of 3 setting suns. Children's laughter echoed through the ornamental hedges. 2 violet-skinned girls and a dark-haired boy, all around 4 years old, racing between the fountains while pursued by an increasingly flustered Rays. Young royals, your velocity exceeds safety parameters. The droid's appendages extended and retracted frantically as he tried to corral the children without harming them. Master will dismantle me if you injure yourselves. From a shaded pavilion overlooking the garden, Dean Creston watched with undisguised amusement. The former reluctant hero now wore his authority with surprising comfort, simple yet elegant royal attire, his once unkempt hair now styled in the Aristoxan fashion, though he still insisted on keeping it shorter than tradition dictated. You're enjoying his suffering, Mirret accused, settling beside him on the cushioned bench. Her own formal wear had been discarded for the evening, replaced by a comfortable tunic that did nothing to diminish her regal bearing. 15 years of surveillance, Dean replied, not bothering to hide his grin. He deserves every moment. The other sisters joined them one by one. Albina from her scientific laboratory where she'd integrated Earth technology with Aristoxan crystal engineering. Taya from the military command center where she'd revolutionized the planetary defense systems. And finally Rona, still dressed in diplomatic finery from meetings with the Centauri delegation. The trade agreement is signed, Rona announced triumphantly. Earth, Aristox, and Centauri, the Triangle Alliance is now official. Grandfather will be pleased, Dean noted, accepting a crystalline cup of Aristoxan wine from a passing servant, though he'll pretend it was his idea all along. Speaking of the Admiral, Taya said, checking her communication band, his fleet has entered our system. They'll dock within the hour. A comfortable silence fell over the royal family as they watched their children play. The youngest, a violet-skinned boy with Dean's determined chin, had somehow climbed atop Rays and was gleefully pounding on the droid's head while the others cheered him on. Permission to gently dislodge the crown prince, Rays pleaded across the garden. Denied, all 5 parents called back in unison, then dissolved into laughter. Admiral Creston's arrival was heralded by the usual commotion, guards snapping to attention, servants scrambling to prepare his preferred quarters, and the distinctive sound of troops marching in perfect formation. The old man himself hadn't changed much in 5 years, perhaps a few more lines around his eyes, his posture still military perfect despite approaching 90. "Grandfather!" the children shrieked, abandoning their torture of Rays to swarm the Admiral. Unlike everyone else in the galaxy, they showed no fear of the legendary military commander, climbing him like a jungle gym as he pretended to resist. Later, after the children had been put to bed with promises of adventure stories from their great-grandfather, the Admiral joined the royal family in their private chambers. The Outer Rim situation has deteriorated, he announced without preamble, activating a holographic star map. The anomaly we detected last year has grown. Something is coming, and the calculations suggest it's nothing we've encountered before. The map showed a distortion spreading across multiple systems, consuming stars and leaving emptiness in its wake. The Void Cascade, Albina whispered, recognition lighting her scientific mind. "It matches the ancient texts in the royal library, the catastrophe that nearly destroyed Aristox 10,000 years ago." "According to legend," Mirret added, "it was stopped by a warrior bearing the royal crest who sacrificed himself to seal the breach between dimensions." All eyes turned to the medallion still hanging around Dean's neck. "Oh no," Dean said, raising his hands. "I already did the reluctant hero thing once. I'm retired. I'm reading comics and raising kids now." "The texts mention a second medallion," Taya said thoughtfully, "a counterpart to the one you wear. Together they form a key." The Admiral's weathered face betrayed no emotion, but his eyes held a familiar gleam that Dean recognized all too well from childhood. "You found it, haven't you?" Dean accused. "That's why you're really here." The old man extracted a small container from his uniform pocket and placed it on the table. Inside rested another golden medallion, identical to Dean's, yet somehow its opposite, the engravings reversed and flowing in contrary patterns. "Discovered in the ruins of Calithria Prime," the Admiral confirmed, "where your parents died." Dean stared at the artifact, a strange resonance building between it and the medallion at his throat. Both began to glow with inner light, projecting interlocking patterns into the air between them. "I hate it when ancient prophecies turn out to be true," he sighed, but his fingers already reached for the second medallion, drawn by something deeper than curiosity. As his hand closed around it, visions flashed through his mind. Vast cosmic forces, the true nature of the royal crest, and the real reason his grandfather had brought him to Aristox all those years ago. "You knew," he whispered to the Admiral. "You always knew." The old man nodded once. "Your father knew too. Why do you think he gave his life on Calithria?" Mirret placed her hand over Dean's, her fingers intertwining with his around the second medallion. "Whatever comes next," she said firmly, "you won't face it alone." One by one, her sisters added their hands to the connection. The medallions pulsed with increasing power, their light binding the family together. Outside, beyond the crystal spires of the palace, beyond the atmosphere of Aristox itself, the stars flickered as something vast and ancient stirred in the void between worlds. The cascade had begun. But this time, the warrior with the royal crest had something worth fighting for, something worth returning to. Dean looked at his family, then back to the medallions glowing with promise and threat in equal measure. "So much for finishing my comic collection," he muttered, but the shadow of a smile crossed his face as he added, "Ready for another adventure, old man?" The Admiral's stern expression finally broke into a genuine grin that took decades off his appearance. "Always, boy. Always." As if in response, both medallions flared with blinding light, revealing symbols that hadn't been visible before, a map to what lay beyond the stars, and perhaps the true destiny of the Creston line. The reluctant hero's story wasn't ending. It was just beginning,